Hey, readers, 2 weeks of school left. Can you believe it? Oh my gosh, it's blown by. And we finished our reading series already. So good job. This week, we're going to do something a little bit different. This week, we're going to learn about the Titanic. Have you heard of the Titanic before? I bet most of you have. But today, what we're going to do is this whole week, we're going to work on Titanic stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to really enjoy it. Today, we're going to start off with a read aloud from Epic Books. So later on, when you need something to do for your independent reading, there are a ton of Titanic books on Epic, okay? So this one is called The Titanic, Digging Up the Past. Okay, reliving the tragedy. So right here is a replica. A replica is like a little mini version of it, of the Titanic. And over here is a real photograph of the Titanic underwater right now. Okay, you enter a museum about the Titanic. Each room tells a different part of the famous shipwreck's story. Survivor stories show the fear and bravery of passengers as they escaped the sinking ship. A big cruise ship, long time ago, over 100 years ago, whoops, that sank and hit an iceberg. Underwater video shows the Titanic as it lies today. The rusted ship right here looks ghostly in its watery grave. What other stories does it have to tell? What is the Titanic? So this is a picture of what it really looked like. And let me read our caption here. Passenger classes. Passengers aboard the Titanic were grouped into 3 classes. First and second class passengers were wealthy, which means they had a lot of money. They had the best rooms. Third class passengers had cheaper tickets. Their rooms were far below deck. What is Titanic? The Titanic was a luxury, that means fancy, passenger ship built in 1912, so over 100 years ago. It was among the largest and fastest ships in the ocean. Many people believed it was unsinkable. In fact, that was its nickname. What was the Titanic's route? So where were they going to and from, Southampton. They were traveling across the ocean to get to New York City, but they crashed right here. They hit an iceberg. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic set out on its maiden voyage. That means its first voyage, its first trip. It was traveling to New York City from Southampton, England, right over here. Around 2,200 people were on board. Whoops. Sorry. So let's see here. So here's an iceberg. An iceberg is a big chunk of ice above water and below water. So you might not even see how big it is because it can be underwater. And famous passenger Margaret Brown was a wealthy American on board. Her attempts to save Titanic passengers made her famous. She became known as the unsinkable Molly Brown. This is the hull. This part of the ship is the hull. 4 days into its journey, nearby ships reported icebergs. The crew was on the lookout for any in Titanic's path. So here's a timeline of, we'll look at that next, but a timeline is a line that has different times on it, right? Lifeboats. Some of the Titanic's deaths could have been avoided. Some lifeboats launched less than half full. Others did not turn back to pick up the survivors in the water. Most passengers stayed calm as the ship flooded after it hit the iceberg. They believed help would come soon, and others scrambled for lifeboats, but there were not enough for everyone on board. Early in the morning on April 15th, the Titanic sank. Many people did not survive. The ship's wreckage settled on the ocean's floor. So it crashed, it sank, and then it went all the way down to the bottom. It would not be seen again for many years. Whoops. All right, so here's the timeline. It started construction in 1809, which means it took 3 years, right, to build. Then April 10th, it sets out to begin its voyage. Our next plotted point, it strikes the iceberg. Then the next day, April 14th, 1912, April 15th, 1912, the Titanic sank. Now we fast forward about 65 years, Robert Ballard leads his first expedition to search for the Titanic. Then we come up 8 more years to 1985. Ballard and his team discover the remains of the Titanic on the ocean floor. That is a long, 7 years, 8 years for them to search for it to finally find it. Wow. 1912. The Titanic wreck becomes protected on the anniversary, UNESCO rules on the 100th anniversary of its sinking. Protected meaning no one can take anything from it, and they're not even going to get it out of the water. Oh, there's Robert Ballard, a huge discovery. That was what we just saw on the timeline, the gentleman that led for the discovery of it. In 1985, oceanographer Robert Ballard went looking for the Titanic. Ballard's research ship towed cameras deep underwater. They sent images of the ocean floor back to the ship. So they were like taking pictures and then they sent them back to the ship. Here's a photo of the Titanic taken by Ballard's crew. So this is an underwater photograph. The final resting place. The Titanic wreckage is 2.5 miles below the ocean surface. That doesn't sound like a long distance, but underwater it is a very, very long distance. Maybe you guys could get in the car and mom and dad could clock it, start at one point and then drive for 2.5 miles. And then you can see how far underwater the Titanic really is. So here's another photograph of the bow. I believe that's the front of the boat. Ballard soon found the ship's bow. It was still in excellent shape. So you can still see like the railings that they would hold on to. The Titanic's stern rested about 2,000 feet away. It suffered serious damage when it crashed to the ocean floor. So it separated into 2 pieces. The distance between the bow and stern answered some questions. The stern is the back part of the ship. It confirmed what some survivors had described. The Titanic broke in half as it sank. And again, there's a whole bunch more books on there, on Epic Books. So this is a chart about the survivors. Fascinating finds. So those are some real artifacts, real things from there. Experts have made many exciting finds near the Titanic. Some captured images of the ship's famous grand staircase. Another found the captain's own bathtub. Oh, cool. Thousands of items from the ship surrounded the wreck. Clothing and toys were easily spotted. Kitchen tools and dishes had also settled nearby. Items created a large debris field. So debris, that was one of our vocabulary words from the beginning of the school year with the 2 bobbies. Do you remember? Debris is stuff just all around. So there was around the ship, there was just a lot of debris, a lot of stuff from the ship all around it. The field formed when items spilled from the ship's broken halves. It stretched for miles and every soul survivors, people who survived. How many people from each passenger class survived? So all passengers, only 37 people survived. If they break it, so all the passengers, now they break it down into the groups, the different groups. The first class passengers, like the richest people, 61% survived. The second class passengers, 42% survived, which means like 6 out of every 10 people, 4 out of every 10 people. And then the third class passengers, the ones that didn't have as much money, only 24% died. So the richer people were survived more. Underwater grave site. This is a Titanic artifact. Since 1985, many explorers have visited the Titanic. Underwater robots help them see inside the ship. Some have collected artifacts or things from the ship. And here they are exploring the Titanic with one of its underwater things, underwater machines. People argue about gathering artifacts from the Titanic. Some believe it preserves the Titanic's history, meaning it keeps. But others point out that the ship is a gravesite. It should be left in peace to respect the dead. Still, many companies continue to explore the site, but they couldn't if it was protected. Honoring the Titanic. Many museums and traveling shows are dedicated to the ship. The Titanic Belfast Museum opened in 2012. So there's museums where you can go and probably see the different artifacts of the ship. Not part of the real ship, because I don't think that they brought any of that up. Discovered in rust. Rusty buildup on the Titanic shipwreck is caused by never before seen bacteria, however you pronounce it, I don't know. The discovery was in 2010, and they used underwater robots to collect samples of icicle-like buildup called rusticles from the ship. Analyzed rusticles to determine what they are made of, and they discovered rusticles contain bacteria, fungi, sand, shells, and other objects. What does it mean? The Titanic may be gone by 2030 because of the bacteria, so it might just deteriorate, rot it. That's not very long. That's 9 years away. The bacteria may be used to break down harmful shipwrecks. No knowledge of bacteria can help preserve other metal items underwater. Whoops, sorry about that. We haven't done epic books in a while. I forget how it goes. Sorry. Still, experts believe the ship is in danger. It is naturally breaking down in the ocean, and someday it may completely disappear. But the Titanic's tragic story will never fade from memory. And then at the end, of course, we have our glossary with all those vocabulary words that were highlighted. It's like the dictionary. And then it gives you different websites and different books you can read on the Titanic. But like I said, there are a ton. It was hard for me to pick just one. A ton of Titanic books on there. So I'm sure you learned a lot, but you're going to learn even more because you are going to research today. This is your independent work right now. You are going to research Titanic, whether you find more facts from epic books or when you Google it. You're going to have 6 facts in here. And if you want to add more, that's fine. It's fascinating and you'll find a lot of information. This is called a bubble map because they're bubbles. So what your job now is, you are going to research the Titanic, whether it's from Google or whether it's more epic books. You're going to put 1 fact in each circle, okay? Then you are going to submit a picture of your facts. So that way I can see them all and you don't have to type 6 different sentences, all right? So you're going to enjoy this week, I promise. Research, write your 6 facts, submit a picture of your bubble map. And I'll see you tomorrow for more Titanic.